Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud, while stoned. In this video, we're going to do part 3 of Little Blue Book number 858. There it is, Little Blue Book number 858, titled The Psychology of Leadership. What makes it possible for individuals to control and move the masses? Written by Leo Markun. Copyright date sometime in the 1920s, usually, because poor Mr. Leo Markun died in 1931. So this is probably around 100 years old. His other ones were written right around 1926. So let's see. There we are. There's where we left off. Okay, so here we go. Pick up where we left off in part 2. Thus, we have a condition of double suggestion. The first mover communicates his will to the office holder or orator, who tries to make it the will of the crowd. There are journalists and politicians, too, who consider that it is their business to direct public opinion and that their own convictions do not matter. Their attitude is pretty much that of the writer of advertisements. A man who has a traveling medicine show once told me that he sells soap to be used as toothpaste. Do you use it yourself, I ask? I should say not, was the response. The experts are now of the opinion that a salesman should be sincere. If he sells the bologna 8, he should actually believe it to be more exclusive, more beautiful, and faster than any other automobile on the market. If he is offering lots in Medulla Manor, he should himself be convinced that it is the ideal place to bring up a family. But the air of sincerity is what really matters. Suggestion is more likely to succeed when it strengthens one of several ideas already present in the mind. The man who has already thought of moving to Medulla Manor, but who is also interested in various other suburbs, is a much better prospect than is one who has never seen any good reason for moving out of the city. The second or third salesman of suburban lots or life insurance may reap the benefits of the eloquent remarks made by the first one to visit an individual. Advertising matter sent through the mail is frequently relied upon to put the possible customer into a favorable frame of mind for the reception of the traveling salesman. The name of the product and the firm are recognized, and this is almost always an advantage. For one thing, the unknown article or manufacturer is without prestige. The source of the suggestion means a great deal. Sometimes the fact that a piece of folly appears in print makes it appear more probable that it would if simply communicated orally. There is such a thing as genuine authority. If we cannot search out all the biological facts for ourselves, we take the word of competent biologists. But knowledge of theology, or even of a science, say geology, is not evidence for the ability to give expert opinions in biological matters. Many a clever lawyer is lamentably ignorant with regard to economics or matters of public health. The man who knows how to manage his own business may be unable to discriminate between well-engraved stock certificates which are valuable and those which are not. If such a person buys or is presented with certain securities and his name is used, many people will be more easily influenced to purchase them. The great leader must concern himself with the little leaders, and if possible, he must turn their prestige and authority to his own advantage. No matter how much political capacity a man may have, he works with the aid of an organization. The military commander depends upon his colonels and captains and subalterns and non-commissioned officers. The private is most easily influenced by the corporal, the voter by the precinct chairman, the laborer by the foreman of the gang. In every little city, one or more women are regarded as leaders of fashion. What is going on in the designing rooms of Paris and New York means nothing to the ready-to-wear dealer until Mrs. Dowager and Mrs. Van Money adopt the new styles. These ladies may owe their prestige to the age of their families or to the possession of wealth or simply to that personal magnetism which it is so difficult to analyze. Certain merchants and manufacturers, too, have a reputation for excellence. The same article which one man sells at $15, another finds a drug on the market at 12. The large firm, the one which has been long established, and that which has made its name familiar by advertising or at a particular advantage, the word imported carries prestige, although foreign is derogatory. We are told that photoplays coming from France and Germany have not fully been appreciated simply because of the failure to apply the proper word. Miss Kelly, the dressmaker, who cannot earn more than $30 a week, becomes Meme Chanel, or no, Meme Cellini. Meme Cellini, and her weekly income jumps to $100. Her dresses turn to gowns and to robes. Her cloaks become Montagne, and her furs are rechristened furriers. Ham and beans are worth at least 3 times as much under French names as they are in plain English. Gray thieves are edible, though dogfish may disgust. The ordinary citizen who knows what he likes, even if he can't explain why, is distinctly influenced in his appreciation of entertainment by the reputation of the entertainers. The comedian is funny. He knows before he hears or sees him. The violinist is one of the best, as all the critics agree. His recital will be applauded then. The evangelist, who has made many sinners hit the trail, finds his audiences disposed to accept his influence. Such reputation must be deserved. The usual form of rationalization has even become an advertising slogan. But prestige and high quality are by no means inseparable. The best restaurant in town, that is, the one where the most superior food is served, may not be the one which is patronized by the social leaders. Perhaps it is located in a side street. But if Miss Van Money decides to leave the beaten path for the sake of the Southern waffles at the Awful Inn, this may be sufficient to make the reputation of the hostelry and the fortune of its proprietor. The more volatile social sets in Los Angeles and New York flit from one cabaret or restaurant to another. Yesterday, the moving picture crowd went to Tetrazi's. Yeah, Tetrazi's. But this evening, you will find them at the Blurry Boot. Tetrazi's is deserted, and the Greek who operates it is thinking of turning it into a vegetarian restaurant. In London, prestige generally goes with antiquity. The haberdasher or cutler who wants a prosperous establishment must put up a little sign announcing that the shop was opened in 1756. If His Majesty once purchased braces or perhaps a gadget for checking screen doors there, this is sufficient to guarantee respectability. Not all individuals are equally suggestible, and each person responds better to some particular form of influence Some men and women tend to respond to suggestions in a directly negative way. To the clever leader, such an idiosyncrasy offers no great difficulty. He has but to approve the white when he wants the independent thinker to choose black. The obstinate individuals, if they cannot be approached singly, are handled by means of indirect hints. It is always better that those who are led by means of suggestion should be unconscious of the art which is being exercised upon them. They must not be directed against their desires. Their will must simply be made to coincide with that of the leader, so far as a certain action is concerned. Suggestibility tends to decrease with age. This is simply to say that old habits are difficult to break, not necessarily that older people are more intelligent. It is true, though, that abnormal suggestibility and stupidity often go together. It has frequently been asserted that women are more ready to follow suggestion than men are. This has never been definitively proved, though. Probably there is little difference between the sexes in this regard. If husbands have exerted more influence upon wives than wives upon husbands, we may attribute this to the greater authority of the male, to his better education, and to various similar factors. Suggestion is largely responsible for waves of crime and mental disease. One hysterical person may be sufficient to infect a community or a country with hysteria. A new manner of killing others or oneself may be adapted by hundreds. The readiness to make use of a new invention, such as the wireless telephone, may perhaps be explained as a readiness to take advantage of the best gifts of applied science as soon as they become available. But what shall we say of the dancing fad? When the waltz came out, was it a palpable improvement upon the dances which had preceded it? Byron greets the first feverish waltz epidemic in England with endearing waltz to thy more melting tune, bow, Irish jig, and ancient rigadoon. Scotch reels avant, and country dance forego. Your future claims to each fantastic toe. Waltz, waltz alone, both legs and arms demands. Liberal of feet and lavish of her hands. Hands which may freely range in public sight, where ne'er before, but pray, put out the light. But here the muse with due decorum halts, and lends her longest petticoat to waltz. The excessively moral people of the time objected to the new dance because it permitted contacts of a sort which had previously not been tolerated publicly. This was perhaps a reason why young people took it up quickly, but the prestige of novelty seems to have been the chief reason for the rapid spread of waltzing, as it accounts for the metric prominence of the tango, the shimmy, the charleston, and the black bottom. The waltz has enjoyed at least a century of prestige, while some of the new dances are forgotten after a year or two. Various commercial interests are now concerned with the novelty in the Terpsichorean art. Terpsichorean art, whatever that is. The dancing teachers, for instance, must have something new to teach those who are already familiar with the old steps. The dancing stars of vaudeville and the revues absolutely require novelties if they are to hold their public. The moving picture theaters, trying to benefit from the enthusiasm shown for the Charleston, stage demonstrations and contests until they help to make the dance boresome. We seize upon novelties of all sorts more readily than our ancestors of a certain age did. and improved methods of communication tend to bring the new dances and tunes quickly into other countries than those in which they originated. I suppose it is more different now than it used to be for any sort of leader to retain his influence over a long period of time than it used to be. Yet public favor has always been notoriously fickle. Perhaps the leader who is himself somewhat changeable has more chance of lasting success than the one who harps ever on the same key. Not really. Browning depicts vividly the change of feeling toward a hero in The Patriot. It was roses, roses all the way, with myrtle mixed in my path like mad. The house roofs seemed to heave and sway. The church spires flamed, such flags they had a year ago on this very day. There's nobody on the housetops now, just a palsied few at the windows set. For the best of the sight is all allow at the shambles gate, or, better yet, by the very scaffold's foot, I trow. The lost leader, Browning deals with the hero who cannot be satisfied with copper and applause. Just for a handful of silver he left us, just for a bond of stick in his coat. We shall march prospering, not throw his presence. Songs may inspirit us, not from his lyre. Deeds will be done, while he boasts his quiescence, still bidding crouch, whom the rest bade aspire. Men are fallible. This is apparent, whether we consider them individually or in the mass. But people are more suggestible, perhaps for good as well as for evil. When they are gathered in large numbers, our word, mob, is derived from the Latin mobile, vulgus, the movable common people. A crowd, says Edward Ainsworth Ross, even an excited crowd, is not a mob, nor is an excited crowd bent on violence a mob. Great mental instability marks the true mob, and this characterizes only the crowd that is under the influence of suggestion. A lynching party may be excited, disorderly, and lawless without being a true mob. The crowd that lynched 13 Italians in New Orleans seemed to know exactly what it wanted and how to go about it, representing the coming together of all who had been affected with the same grim rage at the news of Chief Hennessy's assassination. Although mere numbers may contribute to criminality by bringing about a certain feeling of anonymity in the individuals who form the crowd, the mob does not exist, according to Ross, unless there is a single-mindedness. According to Sidus, in the mob, direct suggestion is effective. In the crowd, suggestion, that is, the persons who make up a mob all act as if they were hypnotized. When people are pressed together closely, their voluntary movements are restricted. Thus, they are made more suggestible. Sidus assures us that intensity of personality is in inverse proportion to the number of aggregated men. He speaks as though he were dealing with a mathematical function, a precious relationship. There is a certain tendency to lose individuality in a crowd, but it may operate about as well as an assemblage of 40 persons as in one of 40,000. In fact, I suppose that a condition somewhat resembling single-mindedness is easier of attainment in a comparatively small crowd. The tens of thousands who attend a great collegiate football game, together with the hundreds of thousands who receive the details over the radio or in some other fashion, share a particular interest, but it is absurd to say that they have a group mind. In no animal herd is sympathy perfect. Graham Wallace truly remarks that if a sheep being bitten by a fly scratches its ear with one foot, the sheep feeding beside it does not do the same thing. Imitation occurs only in certain cases, usually when the whole flock is actually concerned. Still less can a group of human beings be single-minded. Boris Sidus declares that large mass of social organisms produce, as a rule, very small persons. Great men are not to be found in ancient Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, Persia, but rather in the diminutive communities of ancient Greece and Judea. Do small communities really offer greater scope of individuality and genius? I think not. It is not merely the leaders who tend to gravitate to the great cities, but also artists and scientists who work chiefly as individuals. It is not necessary to be isolated in order to be original. 2 or 3 decades ago, the sociologists and social psychologists were wont to ascribe unity to various social groups. But now, even Le Bon's theory that the mob is single-minded has come to appear exaggerated. Sidus studied hypnotism in the laboratory. Some of his conclusions are perhaps mistaken, but at least they are the result of his observations under test conditions. But when he speaks of the mob as if it were a hysterical patient, we may suspect him of taking too long a leap. Thus, at a rival meeting, it is true that some persons act as they would not if they appeared one by one before the evangelist, but others are comparatively little affected. Sidus says of the mob, no sooner is a suggestion ended, no matter how criminal, how inhumane it might be, than it is immediately realized, unless other suggestion, more in accord with the general nature of suggestions, in which the mob self was trained, interferes and deflects the energy of the mob in another direction. But the mob self is not trained at all, and it is not true that any single suggestion is bound to lead a mob to action. Sidus sets up substantially this syllogism. Blind obedience is a social virtue. Blind obedience is the essence of suggestibility. Therefore, society, by its nature, by its organization, tends to run riot in mobs, manias, crazes, and all kinds of mental epidemics. But what sort of blind obedience is expected by the social group? Certainly not the readiness to follow a leader with ideas of his own. We are expected to live in accordance with the mores and morers, the established habits and customs that the mobs and manias frequently arise. I have no intention of denying, but they are protests against the social habits, not manifestations of them. On the other hand, the habit of doing things uncritically is of some importance, and when a fad becomes firmly established, it takes on almost the authority of an old moral law. Old-fashioned school trustees are horrified to find the schoolgirls under their control, displaying their knees. Oh, dear God. But everybody's doing it, appears to be sufficient justification. As a matter of fact, the man who is capable of acting in accordance with his emotions and impulses in a crowd is likely enough to do the same thing acting individually. Who is not a potential thief or murderer when a group of young men go out to whip a woman or to tar and feather a free-speaking octogenarian? We are reluctant to believe that they are acting with moral minds and bodies. There may certainly be a leader, It may happen that the idea occurred to one individual who then proceeded to suggest it to others. But the crowd or mob, in such a case, is formed only after each member has agreed to the proposed action. The members feel that there is safety in numbers. A single murderer may be executed, but hardly 100. For one thing, witnesses know how unsafe it is to arouse the enmity of 100 defendants, some of whom may be prominent in the community, and their 1,000 friends. Thus, a man who may be afraid to commit a crime independently may join others for this purpose. But it is inaccurate to say that he has entered into the group mind and taken for the time the low intelligence and malice of the worst members of the mob. Fear may be contagious. When a fire breaks out in a theater, it is sufficient for a few individuals to run to the doors, and a panic is pretty certain to ensue. There have been cases where a manager has stopped such a stampede by ascending upon the stage and making a brief, cool speech. We are not trained very efficiently to think and act for ourselves. In any emergency, we are likely to follow the leader. Yet the individual who is not easily excited keeps his head in a crowd and shares the fear or anger of his neighbors only to a small extent. We'll pause there for hydration because I'm getting caught now. This hydration break, and every hydration break, is brought to you by my friend Maddie. Hydrate, Maddie. Let's see, where did I leave off? In considering the riots and panics and rebellions of history, we must remember that the participants were largely self-selected. No man who really cared for the old regime joined the crowd which stormed the Bastille. The members of the mob had been, as individuals, cherishing grudges and resentments. For them to act individually would, of course, have been impossible. Action in concert is by no means sure proof of the existence of a group mind, although it points to some common purpose. During the crusade against the Albanese, we are told a religious mania broke out among thousands of women, causing them to run naked in utter silence through the streets. The religious feeling was not new, but the way in which it was expressed depended upon the power of suggestion. Some women tore off their clothes and ran through a public place. Many members of her sex felt religious zeal, but were unable to convert it into action as the able-bodied men were doing by joining the armies which went forth against the heretics. On the whole, I suppose the women acted just about as rationally as the men. If emotion must be expressed through the muscles, it is better that it should not harm others. Even the children were aroused by the preaching of the wandering friars, and they formed crusade expeditions of their own to save the Holy Sepulchre for Christianity. They did not know what direction to take. When they came to a body of water, they could not tell how to cross it. They had no arms, and they knew little about fighting. Kings and parents protested in vain that the children could accomplish nothing. Their playmates were marching on to Jerusalem, and the boys had to express their enthusiasm for the true faith. Many of them were drowned or sold into slavery or perished of hunger. The pious zeal which brought about the expeditions against the Saracens also caused many anti-Semitic excesses. For good Christians simply to prove how earnest their belief in the meek Judean was, even by exterminating the race from which he sprang. The leader who teaches men to kill cannot be certain that they will stop when he wants them to. We are all inclined to form habits, to repeat what we have already done, and the habit-following tendency may at any time prove itself stronger than the readiness to carry out new suggestions. Most of our acts are repetitions, not novelties. The politician who has turned many young voters into Republicans is likely to find, when he becomes a Democrat, that his personal followers are not absolutely his, to dispose of as he likes. Even such an extraordinary leader as Theodore Roosevelt found it impossible to establish a party of his own permanently. The ordinary leader must go with the tide. This is as much as to say that his leadership is chiefly nominal. What any one man can do is limited by conditions beyond his control. Which hero of history, if he were now living in the United States, could bring back slavery? Economic conditions are no longer favorable. It was not Abraham Lincoln who abolished slavery. Aside from forces which we must consider impersonal, the influence exerted by other men has to be taken into account. Even in the single-minded mob, we cannot always find a leader. Usually the first orientation of minds is brought about by some object, spectacle, or event, says Ross. In a group of men who have been brought up to have substantially the same ideas of right and wrong, the happening is likely to stimulate similar responses in most of them. For example, in defiance of the hot patriotism of wartime, a stupid fellow handles the national flag in what seems to be a disrespectful manner. His crime is all the worse if his name or his appearance tends to link him with the enemy. Many good patriots become angry, and all feel that he should be severely dealt with. A self-assertive leader may be able to fix the form of punishment to make it more lenient or more severe than it would otherwise be. It is barely possible that one man should keep the traitor from being harmed at all. Such intervention, if successful, would afford an example of true leadership. It is no great feat to lead people in the direction where they want to go. The popular leader is no more than a banner carrier, usually. Of course, the politician doesn't always go where he seems to be going. It may be his business to direct his followers along a detour, but he must manage to convince them that he is still upon the king's highway. This is true not only of the leaders in democracies. Aristocratic and autocratic rulers, too, are more or less bound by tradition. However well established their possession of the divine grace may be, they are expected to do pretty much what their predecessors did. A new sort of tax is always more resented than an old one, even when it is actually less burdensome. In such matters, there is considerable room for manipulation and deception. And when the leaders find that the people are dissatisfied with them, they may bring about a war or in some other fashion turn the feeling to their own account. Some office holders are content to exploit the people for a single term, feeling this to be more profitable than the attempt to retain popularity. It has often happened, though, especially in the United States, that officials who made no attempt to conceal their dishonesty have nevertheless remained in office or have even been elected to more lucrative ones. Still goes on. This interest of any individual in the public treasury seems to be a small one. Therefore, favor can be won with a few dollars, sometimes with a handful of cigars and a democratic slap on the back. We have much reason. Let me see that. Yeah, we have much reason to believe that turning out the jacks in office will simply bring in new ones. It's true. Perhaps less clever at stealing, but also more wasteful and greedy after a period of compulsory abstination. I think we'll stop there. Yeah. we'll stop there. And that's where we'll stop part 3. And let me put the mark where we stopped. Boom. There we go. Page mark. All right. So this is the end of part 3 of Little Blue Book number 858. There you go. Titled Psychology of Leadership. What makes it possible for individuals to control and move the masses? Written by Leo Markun. Copyright 1920 something. Thanks for listening and join me in part 4.